The next session,
Auto member chairing this session. And so, Rajan, please be prepared for very tough questions on Peak 15. Let me kick it off by first trying to understand what's going on in AI. I mean, is it just a buzzword? Is there real hype? Is it reality? And Shridhar, who better than you to walk us through what's the thinking right now in big tech or tech giants like NVIDIA? And let me first start by congratulating you. What a blockbuster quarter you've had. Fantastic earnings, record high sales, and obviously that sounds more reality than hype.
It has to be reality. Is this working? Am I audible? Great. So it's a very interesting topic to be a panelist on. And as you said, it's very true. Today, generative AI phenomena is so huge that everybody and anybody wants to be a part of it. But I just want to take a step back on this and give a different perspective on the hype part of it. So if we look at it, any technology phenomena that has happened to us in the past, if we classify it into three parts, the first one is a technology force, and I would compare AI as a fundamental technology force like internet or electricity. The second one is about platform innovation, and I would give an example of Google Maps maybe as a platform, or social media initiatives as a platform. And then the third is around applications. So the hype that happens around the fundamental technology forces is always going to be high because of the possibilities that it opens out.
Sure.
And I think this hype is good because this hype will then lead to us getting the right kind of startups, the right kind of applications, and the right kind of solutions to some of the grand challenges that we are facing today. So this hype is good. The second hype that I wanted to talk about is any startup wanting to become a part of this AI phenomena. And I think that is where the test will happen on who is actually solving a real problem versus who is just being a part of this entire ecosystem.
Great.
Are you saying like AI is hype? There's no reality?
Yeah, I was about to pick on that as well, Rajan. So first Shridhar said this is reality and NVIDIA's numbers are clearly showing it's reality. Then he's admitting it's hype, but he's also saying it's good hype. So let's try and distinguish the good hype from the bad hype in a bit. But Rajan, what's going on? Like, why now? We've seen AI and AI being a buzzword for a very long time, but something changed in the last 1 year.
I think you should ask him what's changed. Because, he's got the best view into the, what's changed.
So, Shridhar,
seen
that
NVIDIA's
last 1
market
year.
cap go from what to what? It's over $1 trillion.
Yeah.
What did it go from? Like, it was like 100 billion?
It was almost 300 billion.
Billion, like what, 8 months ago or something, no?
Almost 9 months back.
9 months ago, yeah. You should talk a little bit about, I think it's the underlying technology
that's
layer.
That's a topic that I'll
not
say
the market cap, not the market cap. We're not here to talk about NVIDIA market cap. Those of you that didn't buy the stock, sorry about that. Those of you that bought the stock, amazing. But no, just talk a little bit about, maybe you can talk a little bit about what's changed, because you got the underlying.
Especially in the last 1 year, if you could talk about that as sort of, is that an inflection point of sorts?
Sure. So, I think I would relate with an example here. So, and Rajan, you will relate to it very well. So, Google Maps got launched as a platform in February 2005. They became a platform on our mobile devices in around 2008 timeframe. And by 2011, we had an entire industry which was flourishing around maps as a base framework or a base platform. Now, this is where my comment on the hype comes in. Whenever there is something as fundamental, a technology as AI, which I compare to internet or electricity, that comes in, everybody wants to be finding out how they can leverage on that force. And what changed in the last 1 year is this entire ChatGPT, OpenAI phenomena opened out these frontiers to a common person. As in, AI was still an enigma at a common man's level where they read about it in the newspapers, they saw something on the televisions and stuff, but they could not relate to what is it going to happen, or how is it going to impact me as a person.
Sure.
As in, my 9-year-old daughter is using ChatGPT today, day in and day out. And I think that's a good way to say that AI has touched the lives of a common citizen or a common person, and that has opened out a humongous spectrum of possibilities. So,
Right, so the consumer, the end use case touching the lives of people, and that's why you believe that this is why we've seen that change. But Rajan, hype or reality, pick one. Good or bad, we'll talk later, but you have to say hype or reality.
Yeah, I'd say, look, it's real. But in the near term, I think let's set aside, NVIDIA, Google, Amazon, etc. Let's set aside the big tech companies, right? But I do think in the early stages, right, the valuations are, astronomical. Right? You have these companies that are pre-launch, that are raising lots of capital at very high valuations. So, and this happens in every cycle. I think the reason I say it's real is because if you just look at the use cases, right, whether it's ChatGPT, and I do think that's the big change, right? If you look at last year, this time to this year, right now, what's changed is ChatGPT was used by 100 million Indians. I mean, not Indians, globally, right?
Globally.
And it became sort of the zeitgeist of the world because all of a sudden, the average consumer on the internet could actually use AI in a very useful sort of way, right? And then we saw what it could do to many sort of space, like whether it's writing an email, whether it's doing your homework, whether it's making a video, whether it's, like so many things, right? So I think we saw all these use cases very rapidly evolve. So I would say, look, it's real because the near-term use cases are few. Like, let's be very clear. The LLMs still do hallucinate.
Yeah.
So be careful what you use it for. But it's very real, right? So I'll give you an example. Like, Radhika, my wife has a startup and she was looking for a specific role. And she said, hey, can you help me with this job description? Took me like 90 seconds.
Yes.
I went to ChatGPT, said job description for this type of role. Boom, I made a few edits. Here it is, right? That's like, I would have had to sit there for hours trying to write this job description. So I do think it is real, right? And it's real at every level, right? You can look at what's happening at the infrastructure level, whether it's the GPUs, whether it's the hardware, whether it's hyperscalers. If you look at our own portfolio at Peak 15, we have about 20 AI startups already. Now, most of these investments we made before AI was the zeitgeist, and they are at the infrastructure level, at the tooling level, at the application level. You look at some of the applications, they're very interesting. Now, all that being said, look, it's really still very early.
Sure.
It's almost like internet. Netscape just got launched, right? The browser got launched. That was 1990, and then went public 1996. So we haven't seen anything yet. And I think so the use cases are real. It's very, very real. But I think we're ahead of ourselves in terms of what this can do in the near term.
Right.
And as Bill Gates always says, we tend to overestimate the impact of something in the near term, but we significantly underestimate what this could do over a long period of time. So very much in the real camp, but to his point, there is a lot of hype.
Okay, so now you've obviously said real camp, but there is hype, and just so those of you who know Rajan's the optimist, and Rajan's the one who's always extremely optimist. But I will ask a slightly controversial question to you here, Rajan. A lot of people seem to be comparing what's happening in AI to what happened in Web3, all right? And I think many feel that it's the kind of excitement, the kind of action and energy you saw around everything Web3 was exciting, and then we saw some bit of that tapering off. There is some sense of a fear that AI is going through that same journey right now where everyone seems to be excited about it. Yes, there are real use cases we're seeing with ChatGPT. Yes, there are real results that are being shown by companies that are adopting and leveraging AI early on. But at the same time, we're still overestimating, to use your term, it slightly. How would you
so I
that?
think it is, look, when we were in the middle of the Web3 storm, right, I think lots and lots of folks, both technologists as well as investors, got very excited. But I think, look, blockchain still is a very, very important technology that I think over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years will have a very material impact. However, I think what happened with Web3 and crypto specifically is, the use cases were limited, right? The number one, number two, and number three use case was speculation. You buy it low, you sell it high. You hope you buy it low, you sell it high, but sometimes you bought it high and you lost money, right? So it was speculation. So
Sure.
the trading platforms created some value. They made a lot of revenue for some period of time. We do think now we are beginning to see some global payments use cases that emerge that are quite interesting. But outside of that, we haven't yet been able to find, when I say we, I mean the ecosystem more broadly, hasn't been able to find those killer use cases. I think what is different with AI, first of all, by the way, AI has been around for 20 years, right?
Right.
Google search is built on
AI, right.
on AI. So I think we are specifically now talking about generative
Generative AI,
Yeah.
which
right.
is sort of what's changed in the last year is
Sure.
thanks to large language models, we've seen this sort of massive explosion of LLMs and the use cases. But these use cases, I think, are very real,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's being able to create amazing videos or amazing images, whether, generative AI, right? Whether it's text, whether it's image, whether it's audio. I mean, for instance, I think this morning you guys saw some videos, those of you that were around, that were made by generative AI. So I think the use cases are literally already 100x. Because, in many ways, so far at least, the scaled up use cases for Web3 was only one.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we're already like 100x. By the way, that could change very well, right? I mean, I'm still very much a believer in blockchain technology.
Sure.
Right? And I think it's just a matter of time where we'll figure out. I do think the first big real use case is going to be cross-border payments.
Right.
In fact, one of our recent investments was actually, in that space. So it's yet to come. Whereas I think here, already you can think of 100 use cases that are interesting. Right?
Sure.
Some will be very large, mainstream. Some will be not. So I think we are at a different place. Now that being said, crypto ran up to 3 trillion of market cap.
Yeah.
I don't know what the imputed market value today of all the AI companies, especially big tech, is probably 20, 30 trillion already. Is it worth 20, 30 trillion today? Probably not. But we're in a different place. I think we're in a different place
But
with
Rajan,
AI.
you are admitting that AI is living up to the hype way more than probably Web3 did. In some
AI
ways,
has many
yes.
more use cases.
It is
Many
common.
more
Already,
use cases.
already.
As I said, it is touching the common lives.
Yeah.
I think just to further exemplify what Rajan said, the other day I was called to speak at one of the liberal arts institute in the north, and there they wanted me to talk about, hey, how liberal arts folks can leverage on AI. Now, I had no clue on how that is going to happen. I literally went to ChatGPT and it threw me an answer in 2 minutes.
What did it say? What did it say? Well, for all the liberal arts grads in the room.
So it focused around the generative AI phenomenon with respect to the text to image changes, the behavioral aspects of AI, the entire legitimacy of AI, as we are saying that, hey, how do we put the guardrails around it? So it touched psychology, economics, law as 2-3 areas around which a liberal arts institute could leverage AI. Then it was a good platform for me to figure out how I can amplify those messages. So I'm saying
Sure.
it's a real use case that each and every one of us can have and touch and feel.
So I think we've agreed on the fact that there are real use cases. We've also agreed on the fact that there are more use cases than we've seen with other technological innovations in the past, and that's what's making it more real and less hype. But let's now focus a little more on what's happening in India. Of course, the last time Rajan spoke about Indian startups and AI, it made global headlines. But Shridhar, to you first. Share with us what's going on in India as far as the AI space is concerned. How does it stack up with some of the other geographies? What's the opportunity? What are the headwinds?
So I think the entire AI ecosystem in the country is extremely vibrant. To exemplify that, people may know we have a program for our startups called the Inception program. Globally, there are about 14,000 startups in the program across 100 countries. About 1,400 to 1,500 of them are from India in that program. So we have almost...
So 1,400 AI startups in your From India in the inception
From India in the inception
In the
program.
inception program, that's
Yeah.
huge,
That's huge.
1,400, yeah.
And
By the way, we only have like 90,000 startups in India, so.
Of which 1,400 are in AI
Are in
as part
AI.
of your inception
Your
program.
inception program. Well, I mean, every AI startup is probably in the
Yes.
NVIDIA
Yes,
program.
yes.
as in it is estimated.
I mean, if you're an AI startup and you're not in the NVIDIA inception program, I'm really worried about you. I mean, like, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's a pretty vibrant space. But what we see is there are certain things that are limiting the thought process of Indian startup founders, and infrastructure being a very important one. And just to again give an example, if I look at the number of 10,000 GPU clusters, a single GPU clusters with about 10,000 GPUs in the US, as in the last week counted there were 20, now we have stopped counting. In India, we don't have
When did you-
one.
when did
Just
you
to
stop
help
counting?
understand,
When
you're
did you
talking
stop
about,
counting?
yeah.
3 months,
Oh, 3 months ago.
3-4 months
Got it.
back.
So you're
So-
talking about 10,000 GPU clusters in the US.
Yeah,
And those are, and how does that compare with India?
we don't even have one,
Right.
right?
Right.
Now, why am I saying this?
What is India's largest cluster? Roughly how big?
I think about 2,000 to 2,500 GPUs.
So you're saying there are 20,000 plus GPU
those-
clusters in the US?
Yeah.
And our largest one is 2,000,
Exactly.
right? And then how many do we have above like 1,000? Only one,
Maybe 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
Wow. So that itself is probably helping us understand that on infrastructure, we're
We
nowhere
are-
there yet.
So the thing is, here computing infrastructure is a resource. And if you constrain a startup founder or a startup ecosystem with that resource, then they are only going to think that much. They are going to think the first thing, and I have had these conversations with startup founders, their thought process is, hey, let me design my workload based on how much GPU availability I have or how much GPUs can I access. So it itself constrains their thought process to think big.
So you're saying Indian AI startup founders are thinking small.
They could think big.
They should be thinking
They
much
should.
bigger.
Rajan,
should.
to that point, when you're sitting and evaluating, and I understand you must be doing hundreds of them in a month, if not more.
Well, now we know. I mean, there's 1,400 of them that we should have looked at. We should go back and check
Yes.
how many of them we met.
I'm hoping of the 1,400 as part of the Inception program, you've met at least half of them if you've not met more. But
I'd be worried if we haven't.
yes, but Rajan, when you're sitting and evaluating these AI startups, is that a constraint that comes up? And do you agree with the fact that they're thinking small, not necessarily because that's how they want to think, but because the infrastructure just doesn't support it?
No, it looks it's absolutely true. Now, the thing is, AI, if you look at AI startups in India, right, they play at different levels, right? There are AI tooling, what I call AI infrastructure startups, right? So if you just look at our portfolio, a company like Infosys, it's a GPU serverless platform, very, very early stage company, true foundry. They have large enterprises, like deploy LLM models within the enterprise. So there's a whole set of companies that are there. Then you have sort of application level. I do think for application level, you need to and application level, there are companies that build their own models. They're increasingly becoming vertical companies, healthcare, education, customer support, etc., functional models. And then there are ones that are much more horizontal, right? So I think for the application level companies, this is a real constraint.
Sure.
Right? Not having this infrastructure, and it really boils down to two things, right? How much capital can you raise?
Yeah.
But also, can you get access? I mean, today, even if you wanted to, in India, you could probably get a Bharat Ratna. There are a few people sitting in the front of the room, but soon we'll get a Bharat Ratna before you get a H100. Okay, so that might happen. So, it is so difficult. There's so much demand, which is why, NVIDIA is having this kind of quarters that business has not seen. The quarters that NVIDIA is delivering today, modern business has not seen. And so if you want to get I don't know how to get one. I mean,
Even I don't
nobody
know.
knows how to get one. I'm sitting next to you. Why do you think we invited him here today? So that
All right, so just so you know, there is a business reason to have Shridhar here at this session.
So I do agree. In fact, I do agree absolutely, right? Which is this lack of compute infrastructure, and it's a combination of things, right? It's capital that you have to raise. It is timing. The fact that there's a global shortage of this. If you ask these guys, what's the priority of who gets? I mean, the hyperscalers would be priority 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 and 7. Then you have the large OEMs, and then somewhere down the list would be sort of Indian startups that are trying to get it, right? Now, of course, hopefully you guys will change that. So I do think as a nation,
Sure.
we should try to solve this. Like one thing the government can do, right, is to build a very large scale. Actually, an interesting thing would be, to say, what is the largest cluster out there? What is it, 20,000, 40,000? How big is it?
Yeah, anywhere upwards of that. No.
What, 40,000?
50,000.
Let's say 50,000, okay? So why shouldn't India build 100,000 GPU cluster, okay? And then we give it to Indian developers, Indian research institutions, Indian startups to build on it and make it very affordable.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, what are we really good at as a nation? We are good at doing population scale projects at ultra low cost.
High volume, low cost.
100,000 GPU cluster at 1/100th the cost of AWS.
Great idea.
There it is. That's the moonshot. Yeah. That's what we should go for.
And just so you know, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would say that the government is showing the vision towards it. And I think what you said supplements that vision. So
can we expect this to happen soon, or?
The government will tell us that.
So guys, just so you know, Rajan is sitting here with very clear business objectives as far as NVIDIA is concerned. He's passing on some OKRs to me as policy moonshots to go talk to the government about. So Rajan's very clear on what he's delivering here. But honestly, Rajan, this is amazing. What you've set out as the vision for a country like India to build on that infrastructure. But while we talk about that being a sort of headwind or a hurdle or a constraint, there are obvious advantages that India offers, right? You talked about developers, you talked about just the sheer depth and talent that we have around this. Let's first talk about why India, if at all, will be a powerhouse for AI.
See,
any of you?
Okay, you first. I think from a applicability of the AI perspective, the Indian ecosystem can feed into it a lot. The diversity of languages that we have, the diversity of cultures that we have, I think the amount of sheer people that we have, the conversations. Sure. So what does an AI model or an AI application need? It needs to feed on data and diverse data. And I think no other country can feed more diversity than India to an AI model.
Rajan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely, right. I think, there are a bunch of things. So firstly, let's just look at data. We have more data in just about everything. Let's just take healthcare, right, which is going to be, I think, the most interesting industry to apply AI. This was the case when I joined Google. I was at Google for a long time, as you guys know. 2011, when I joined Google, Google was working on AI in many things. Number one area where Google felt at that time, which was 12 years ago, 12 years ago, was healthcare, okay? If you look at healthcare, who has more healthcare data than India? China maybe, but that data can't be used by anybody, except for Chinese. So, we have so much data. Let's look at payments. Let's look at financial transactions. Let's look at, pick your favorite industry. We have 700 million monthly active users on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Population, 100 million plus user platforms, just Indian companies, right? We have so many of them, right? If you look at the data that, let's say, somebody like a Paytm would have, or a PhonePe would have, or an HDFC Bank would have, in financial services, so I think data is one. I think the second thing is, look, we have developers, right? We have the developer talent, and every year that goes by, our talent gets better and better and better, right? So I think that's the second thing we have. I think the third thing we have is we have a sort of a frugal engineering mentality. That
the jugaad mentality.
I don't like the word jugaad, by the way.
Actually, it's a good word.
I don't like jugaad. Sense. No, jugaad is about shortcuts. I've now concluded that jugaad is the worst thing for us. Okay. We should be world class.
Yes.
Yeah.
But frugal.
Frugal but world class. Yeah.
World class and frugal is what India should be, right? So I think that's the third thing. So when you combine all of these things together, really the only thing we're missing now is compute capacity.
Right. Let's go ahead and get that in.
Yeah, we have to get that, right? And by the way, that is a function of capital too, right?
Sure.
Because you need large amounts of capital to actually go and build this out. But look, I think the horizontal, let's call it the foundational models that Sam talks about, whether it's Bard, Sam Altman at OpenAI. Clearly, there are a set of companies around the world that are way ahead, okay? But if you look at the domain models that will get built,
Yeah.
Whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, or the functional models, like in customer service or in sales, there is no reason we're not going to see world leaders come out of India. Because we have the data, we have the talent, we have many of the industries here.
Some
Like, for
grand
instance-
challenges are there.
But I want you to
We have
So
the
why don't you
grand-
talk about the grand
Shridhar,
challenge?
Shridhar, I want you to challenge that a bit, or at least elaborate on that. Rajan says there are 3 clear advantages that India has as an ecosystem to become the AI powerhouse of the world, and which is data, which is the developer talent, and then the frugal engineering, as he talks about it. You're saying the only thing holding us back is the compute capacity, right? I want you to think deeper and say, are we missing something else here? Is that it? If we solve for that, are we all set?
I think so, because look at it from this perspective. If you look at the world's, and we have some view into that, the world's largest corporations, whether it is GE's, the Bosch, Honeywell, name any, Siemens, any of these, they have their back-end engineering happening out of India, and we know that there are teams who are working on some of the core AI projects for these large corporations. So if they are able to work on it, it is the same Indian engineers, it is the same talent pool that they have access to. And they are working on a global scale problem because these are large corporations. So why can't the same talent pool deliver Indian solutions?
So while we have solutions, Rajan, one thing that we haven't touched upon at all, and I'd like both of you to walk us through, the success of any technology depends on the business viability, the revenue models, the ability to generate cash. Have we thought that through? Yes, there are use cases. Yes, there is an obvious opportunity here. Yes, there are problems to be solved, like what you're talking. But what about business viability of AI? Touch upon that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, viability is absolutely there, because if you create value, right, if you have real use cases that create value for businesses or for consumers or for governments, you will capture value, right? And I think the exciting thing about AI, Shweta, is this is the global game. It is not a India game or a Karnataka game or a Noida game.
So we're doing India to the world now.
No, yeah, I mean, look, 2022, 40% of all new Indian startups that got funded were building for the world from day zero, right? And I think sometime this year, more than half of new Indian startups are going to build for the world. We are now beyond just building for India, right? Indian founders are building for the world. And AI is a global game. So, I think this is, and when you look at that, by the way, last year, the global GDP crossed $100 trillion. So what is at stake now is $100 trillion, because every single industry will get impacted by AI. It's going to create just trillions and trillions of dollars of value, and Indian entrepreneurs can build for the world. I'd say, in addition to compute capacity, Shweta, as you were asking the question, we still have a paucity of PhDs.
Sure.
Right? Who are working on AI. So fortunately now a bunch of them are coming back from the US, but we need to have, I think, all our IITs really kind of ramp up on academic research, really being state of the art on computer science. Because if you look at a lot of the entrepreneurs who are building in AI now, they come out of either Google or they come out of Stanford PhD programs or Berkeley or MIT. I think that's an area we still have some work to do.
So
Sure.
just to
Go ahead,
supplement
Shridhar, yeah.
on the point that he touched upon, Rajan touched upon, so we have a lot of conversations going in the higher education and research fraternity, and what you said is right. The research pedigree of the country has to go up. As in, if you look at it from a AI skills penetration perspective, and I was reading, I think this was, if I'm not wrong, a Stanford report or something. So we are at the top of that from a skills perspective, but from a research perspective, we are not there yet.
Sure.
But again, when I talk to the best of the class researchers, and you would also agree to that, their problem is not having access to enough infrastructure.
All right, I know we're running out of time, and I want to spend just a minute or two asking a few questions, but before we head to questions...
I think we're out of time, but...
Are we? Okay. We need to wrap up, so no questions, but I'm going to close this with you picking one of the 5 stages of what we call the Gartner hype cycle of any innovation, and pick one of the 5. Are we at an innovation trigger stage as far as AI is concerned, which is really, we're seeing an event where there's a breakthrough? Are we at the peak of inflated expectations where there is some product usage, but there is just way too much expectation and more hype? Are we at the trough of disillusionment, where there is original excitement, but that's wearing off, and there's low ROI, and that's the point I was making. Are we going to get ROI here? Are we at the slope of enlightenment already, where we are seeing the benefits and the adoption? Or are we at the plateau of productivity, which is the last stage of this hype cycle? Shridhar, pick one of the 5.
So I think I clearly see us that we have crossed the peak. We are now towards the finding enlightenment.
But we don't go through trough stage at all?
We will, but I think most of the stuff is proven now. So
Or is this one of those that's going to go just from peak to
yeah, it will go towards enlightenment.
enlightenment? All right, so guys, that's a big one here. Sridhar is saying there's not going to be any troughs here. We've gone through that peak of inflated expectations already and moving towards what we say the end of the hype cycle. Rajan.
Yeah, I think, by the way, when you have a $13.5 billion revenue quarter with 49% net margin, you are enlightened. Okay? I think for the rest of us, we are in phase 2.
All right, so that settles it. NVIDIA is already in the phase of enlightenment.
I think the rest of humanity and business and startups and investors,
So-
I think we are in phase 2.
All right, all right.
Where
So
we will
that's-
see a trough and then we'll pick back up.
I love it when Rajan is more real because he is the optimist amongst us and he's the one
This
who's
time it
always...
was the other way around.
It was the other way around, clearly. But thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, both of you, for
Thanks
your
so
thoughts.
much,
And
Shweta.
thank you all for being a great audience.
Thank you.
Allow us a second, please, sir. If I could please invite Ms. Gitika Dayal, Executive Director, TIE Delhi, to thank the panelists for sharing their thoughts with us. Wow. From one powerful panel to another, this one is another special one. I would like to